Hello, welcome everyone. This is ModX Network Voices. My name is Ryan Smith. I am alone today, but I am joined from ModX, but I'm joined by a guest. The guest is Mike Eggers. Mike is with Project Frog, and actually Mike and I have a long history. We went to school together at our alma mater, UC Berkeley. Go Bears. And Mike has always been, go Bears, that's right. Mike's always been a very warm and hardworking architect. Really enjoyed going to school with him and studying with him, and glad to have watched his career sort of progress here with Project Frog. I've been following Project Frog. I wrote about them in my book back in 2010, 2011, and they've just been doing really interesting things, combining product approach and manufacturing approach to architecture. He's going to talk a little bit about Project Frog, and with that, Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself, and if you'd introduce us to the company and what you guys do and aim to do, then we'll have a discussion after that.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So yeah, my name is Mike Eggers. I'm the Vice President of Product and Innovation at Project Frog. I joined Frog 5 years ago. We've been around over 15 years. To start out with a little of my background, I am an architect by training, as Ryan mentioned. I worked about a decade in just traditional architectural practice, and a combination of high-end residential, some commercial, retail, and I wanted to jump into technology after about a decade of that. And I actually jumped out of architecture for a little while into GIS and mapping. And worked for a couple of companies, a startup that named EarthMine that was later acquired by Nokia's mapping arm. So I was exposed to, on the technology side, I was exposed to, building scalable systems, cloud-based infrastructure, working with cross-functional hardware and software teams as a program manager, and then also doing some business development on that side. And I wanted to get back into AEC. I really missed it. But I didn't want to just jump back into traditional practice. I wanted to focus on how to apply that thinking in technology and in software to AEC, and think about how can we scale systems, how can we scale our practices, how can we scale our building approach. And that's how I found Project Frog 5 years ago. And I kind of took over really the productization of our building platforms, and then a big piece of it, which I spend most of my time on today, is how to develop technology that really drives scalability for our product platform. Product platform meaning the building side of the business, which we still do. So I'll give you a little quick overview of how Frog works and is structured. I mentioned we've been around about 15 years, and the focus is on building highly flexible, highly scalable prefabricated building systems. And our core belief is that it has to be driven by both a product approach to the building platform and a strong technology platform that underpins that to drive scalability. We have done a number of different building systems over our long storied history. We have a huge presence in education. We're probably best known for that. Mm-hmm. We've done a number of medical office buildings. We've done some data center work. We're doing a lot of quick service retail these days, fast food. I can't talk exactly about who that client is, but it would be one of the top fast food companies in the nation. So we're doing, we're doing 60, 70 buildings a year in that space, and that's a really great one, because it really helps us test out the scalability aspect. We're also a little different in that we don't own factories. We are what we call a horizontally distributed company. We develop the prefabricated building systems in what we call ICAS, or IC as a service, in industrialized construction as a service. So we will either develop those internally or work with external companies to develop prefabricated building systems, and then bring the technology and software needed to help scale those solutions. So we work with manufacturing partners. We don't own factories. We work with external contractors and architects, although we have architects and engineers internally. So it's a bit of a different model, and I think that model has afforded us the ability to be very flexible in the different building systems that we approach, because we're not beholden to, oh, we have to work in steel because we're tooled up to do that, and we can't switch over to wood. We can work in a really flexible way and kind of work with those manufacturing partners to establish kind of nationwide supply chain networks that either serve a company we're working with or our own internal building platform. So that's kind of a summary, and the really key takeaway is highly flexible, highly customizable, prefabricated building systems that can scale to the need of that build program or that corporate entity that we work with.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting business model. I've always been fascinated about it. A few questions sort of unpack this, Mike. One is, you're you're an IT enabled company, and you augment the design and building practice. You're not. Would you call yourself a turnkey solution, or not necessarily? You're just a critical piece of the supply chain.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you want to engage us. So that fast food company that I mentioned, we're pretty turnkey in that regard. So we are developing the building system, the kit of parts. We're in some cases building some custom software. We're standing up their supply chain. We're working, so I guess maybe not completely turnkey, but we'll work with their construction managers and their local AORs and SEORs. So we're really helping drive, they're going through an industrialized construction transformation at the company. They realize, due to labor shortages, other factors, that they can't keep up their current pace. So we're coming in and kind of leading their IC approach and their program, and helping them with that transformation. So in that sense, it's a bit of a turnkey solution that will offer all aspects. But we always work with other builders, other players in that space, and that is very different than a vertically integrated company that would be full turnkey, right?
Right. And let's talk about that, because there seemingly is a number of schools of thought on this. One is, we are seeing, as you know, quite a few startups in the space that are claiming the vertically integrated model, whether they're well capitalized or even smaller companies. Let's go, you go through and you look at like the Kateras of the world. You've got, Blockable, you got Plant Prefab, you got on the East Coast, you've got Von Buckley's organization over there with the modular, vertically integrated modular company that's got in-house design, fabrication and manufacturing, and then also install. And then another school of thought is a distributed horizontal business model, and it's kind of what you're describing. And that inevitably, whenever we hear that model, and we've had a few people on the show, the claim is you've got to make that process IT enabled, because that's the whole idea of horizontal distribution. Do you think the marketplace is at a point where we can have successful and effective horizontal? That's why people vertically integrate, because they're like, look, this disintegrated model and this segregated model is not working anymore for construction, right? So we're going to vertically arrange it, and we're going to control the whole thing. And then gradually we'll let pieces of it go as we find suppliers that can actually deliver on what we're trying to do.
Right.
How has Project Frog sort of managed that game in finding partners in a horizontal format that they can actually trust, that can actually deliver on their products? Are your suppliers certified? Do they go through some sort of vetting process? And how do you develop those relationships? Because I think ideally, you're absolutely right. If we're going to have a truly industrialized construction process in this country and worldwide, we need to have everyone sharing information on an interoperable platform and have a distributed supply chain, like we've seen in other industries, right? Not construction, but we've certainly seen it in other industries. So could you talk to that a little bit? How do you guys manage that quality and manage that workflow and that knowledge flow?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I think it's great to have both right now, right? I think we need both because the vertically integrated companies are great. Yeah, it's like a really good controlled test, right? You eliminate all dispute. Well, not really. You still have internal disputes, probably, I would assume. But you eliminate I think one of the major hurdles, which is we're in a very what I would call a high risk, low trust environment in AEC, right? I'm always worried you're going to sue me and I'm going to sue you, and contracts are written to protect each other. So, I think that's one of the major hurdles that gets eliminated with a vertically integrated company. It's more challenging, right? And when you're horizontally distributed, it does rely on close partnerships, working with we like to find manufacturers that are willing to kind of go the long haul with us, and interested in sometimes transforming how they work along with us. We do a pretty hard vetting process, and we want to maintain suppliers that we work with for years, and that's a big part of it is building that trust. It's, from a cost standpoint, it's always a little more challenging, right? Everybody has to make margin on that whole chain. Right. We've been really successful in still delivering really cost-effective solutions. So I think that's the major challenge, right? And it's building that trust across those partnerships that I think is the major necessary piece, but it's really what's necessary if we're going to change this industry. There won't be enough. The industry is so massive that you can't have enough vertically integrated companies to really change this. Yeah. And when you look at the population growth, the amount of old buildings that need and infrastructure, right? Forget just buildings, but just construction, right? Everything you can imagine needs to be built. There's so much that needs to either be replaced or new stock that needs to be put out in the world that we can't do this with just vertically integrated companies. We have to have an entire transformation of the industry to work more efficiently, work more quickly, and really deliver higher quality buildings, right? At the end of the day, from a build quality standpoint, quality control, QA/QC. So I think it's going to require this approach if we're going to really do it. And it's good, it's good to have both. I think it's helped us, particularly around the software side, think about how we approach systems that are, well, actually not just software and our building systems. We design them in a way that they're not so proprietary that you can't get a new manufacturer up and running. The systems and the processes that we implement need to be repeatable to a new AOR, a new SEOR, a new manufacturer, a new builder. It doesn't require a year-long course or buying a bunch of highly proprietary specialized equipment to get up and running with our building system. And that's helped us, ramp up supply chains, ramp up a brand new architect we would work with, right? Here's how to work with a system. In some cases, that's enabled through technology like Kit Connect that we built. In other instances, just good process, good documentation, and great team that we have to make that work.
Yeah, no, that's great. Are you modeling as Project Frog historically? It's been around 15 years, and I know it's sort of evolved, right? As all businesses do. Where you're currently at, do you see Project Frog as a business model and the construction industry moving towards a model that's akin to some other industries that maybe use a horizontal structure? Do you guys use any models out there like, oh yeah, we're like manufacturing, or we're like the software industry, or we're like this or that? Do you use that at all, or is this completely a new business model, or is it borrowed from various places?
Yeah, I think definitely we borrow a lot of our best practices from the software industry, and I think that we have a very, agile approach, which is a really common approach in software. And that, the idea that you can always respond very quickly to change in a very flexible way. I mean, FROG actually stands for Flexible Response to Ongoing Growth, right? That is our.
Okay. I didn't know that.
It's actually an acronym. Yeah, most people don't know that one, but Yeah, that's what that's what the company stands for. So how do we, and I think that that business model helps us have that flexibility, because the industry's changing rapidly. I think we were kind of one of the early pioneers in this business model for prefab. There's certainly other industries that work in this way. And I think we've been able to prove it out pretty well. But yeah, we're a bit unique. I think that most people, when they encounter Frog, they expect us to, oh, okay, where are your factories and this kind of thing, and we say, well, we operate a bit of a different model here. So
right.
But to your point, I think there's a lot of in the manufacturing space, you have a lot of very distributed supply chains. It's not automotive, aerospace. These are all massively distributed supply chains, very mature, right? So they've had decades to kind of loosen the reins on that supply chain over time, and I think we'll probably see the same. And and I think you mentioned that earlier. Some of these companies will start to probably do that over time and loosen the reins. And I think a couple of companies that come to mind, Bukluk in Sweden. They own factories, but they also have partnerships with, and I think they talked about the factories they own as kind of their marquee, like that's where they really test all their process, and then they're able to hand that over to manufacturing partners, right? And that's a great approach too. That's sort of a hybrid approach. We just made a choice early days to be very capital light. We're a venture-backed company. We were probably one of the earlier sort of venture-backed prefab companies out there. So that was kind of an early choice that sort of stuck, and we've been able to make it happen.
Yeah, and it's geographically and culturally situated in Silicon Valley, right? It kind of grew out of that that ethos. So when you do R&D as a company, certainly on the IT side, it's relatively low risk, other than time, right? Because you're developing new product platforms in the computer, and you're kind of testing supply chain. But ultimately, you've got a prototype, and you got to make something physical. And the argument, or I should say the criticism of construction, is that every project is a prototype, right? Because we don't have we don't have the capacity, we don't have the capital to be able to just to go, let's prototype a 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 square foot education building here. We don't have that. We don't have that luxury. So how does Frog deal with the need to sort of research, develop, and prototype to test their products? Is it done through the projects themselves, or do your factories also do mock-ups with you to test the digital platform and its translation into physical in that process?
I think we've been really fortunate in the past to do full-scale mock-ups on some of our building systems. We've done that with our education systems, data center. The fast food company we're working with, we were really fortunate. They built half of a store just in wall panels that was mocked up ahead of time, and that was to test the system, work out some of the kinks. They invited a lot of their key builders to the site to take a look at the system, understand how wall panelization works, how it gets assembled. So yeah, that's always the best case scenario when we can fund an effort like that. And I think even in prefab, and I would imagine this is probably the case even with vertically integrated companies, there is always learnings on every project, right? Because no two buildings are really alike. It's not a car that you're rolling off the assembly line, a million of them, right? So there's always a little tweak, a little odd corner of something that you need to change, or massively change, depending on the local requirements or programmatic requirements. So it's I think that really speaks to a good process and a good system to capture those learnings. So a continuous improvement approach is really critical there. And that's, when beyond just being able to do mock-ups, it's how do you capture those learnings as they're being manufactured, as they're being assembled in the field, and really push that back onto the next building. And the more of those you can do, the better, right? We part of our advantage is we've just been around so long, so we've built that institutional knowledge for 15 years. And then, through repetition, I mean, doing these fast food buildings is great because the cycle time is very short, and you learn and you repeat and you just there's a very rapid improvement there. That's, I really like that platform that we're developing because the iteration loops are so short. It's like, when do you get to work on 50 buildings that are almost all identical in the span of a year,
Right.
In multifamily housing and other larger buildings, you might be lucky to do 4 or 5. If you're a giant company like Katerra, you might be doing maybe 100, but and you won't be able to see them go up. We get to see them go up, end to end, which is pretty exciting. And there's a ton you learn there. And then it's how do you capture that? How do you distribute that knowledge, make it accessible, through software tools and other processes, make it accessible so that knowledge gets embedded back into the whole iteration of the whole system. So.
Yeah. No, knowledge management is sort of a word that's used in other industries, but not so much in the construction industry. And I think that's effectively what you guys are doing, which is you generate data, you generate knowledge in projects, and how does that feed back into the company operations? And that will be, I think, my personal opinion, and see what you think, is that's going to become more and more critical as we move to an industrialized construction model. Those lessons have to be brought into project teams and learn, and then continuously improved, like a manufacturer might use that feedback continuously, right, to improve their process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of Kit Connect, the software we're building, is to provide a software system that anyone can use, any architect can use or designer can use to capture that knowledge, embed it on the kit of parts, and make that highly accessible. And that's just one approach, right? It's also the processes you institute, how you distribute knowledge among the company. But it's a really critical component, and not in traditional construction, it's not something we have affordance to do, right? It's the typical story. This project's over budget. We're out of fee. Please work till midnight again to get this done. And think of all the RFIs and change orders that fly in construction, and who goes back and updates that BIM model or takes a week to do a retrospective and lessons learned and embed that back in a system. And things just move so fast. We close this one out. Let's get on to the next project. Make sure we don't blow our fee on this next one. And that's just the kind of a big problem, right? Trying to embed continuous improvement and learning in a traditional practice, because you just don't have time, and everything's fee-based. So you can't really afford to you're not getting paid to improve your internal system. You just got to get on to the next project. So that knowledge gets lost. It's usually trapped in people's heads, right? And then you sort of rely on your ninjas in the company that know this stuff, but that's not scalable, right? You can't share knowledge trapped in someone's head across even a medium-sized organization. How do you distribute that knowledge, capture it, make it repeatable, and then so everybody can contribute to it and have access to it in a common environment, right? And that's a big problem we're trying to solve. I think it's a really critical one in the industry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. In the surveys and research and consulting we've done over time, that's been one of the it never is very much identified in these surveys as a problem, even though we're trying to call attention to it. But when you tease it out of people, they'll say, oh yeah, when so-and-so left the company, we lost a huge amount of capacity in X, Y, and Z, right?
Yes.
That they didn't realize they even had.
Exactly.
And so what you're trying to do is capture that, and how do you codify that into a software platform, into an IT solution, and distribute it across the knowledge base. So if you hire someone tomorrow, they can get up to speed in a week or so and just have the same knowledge base.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly correct. It has to be easy easy to capture and then easy to share and distribute. Think about, a lot of employees, they might stay at a firm for 2 years, right? And then they go on to the next thing. So if it takes you several months to onboard a new employee, because they got to learn, how do we work? How do we design? Where are all the bodies buried? Where's all the information? And then they're on to the next firm in 2 years. You've lost a huge percentage of their time in just ramp up and finding things. And, and that's just one example, but like that, getting people up and running with kind of the best practices of the organization. And one thing I remember, it was a research paper you had worked on, Ryan, that it really struck me several years ago. You pointed out one of the key barriers to working with prefabricated systems, both for contractors and architects, is they just don't know. They don't know how to work with it, right? They don't know what are the constraints, what are the specs. Like, how do I'm used to working at the scale of an individual 2x4 and very, kind of almost infinitely flexible, but now I have a sort of constrained system. I just lock up. I don't know what to do. And you really need systems then in place to make that accessible and take away the need to you don't need a big rule book to understand how to work with this system or this Lego kit, right? Which is highly rules-based and constrained. Here's a system that's going to make that easy for you. So that's a big problem we're trying to solve. And then as that system improves, keep capturing that knowledge. This
might be proprietary, Mike. And so if it is, just say, can't talk about it, that's okay. But wondering, are you developing your own proprietary software? Is Kit Connect that and other tools in the future? Or is this a plugin to Revit? Or is this, working through Autodesk's Revit open API now and writing your own tools? What's the solution generally?
Definitely can talk about it. So Kit Connect started out initially as an internal piece of technology to solve some of the challenges we saw internally, but it is now a market-facing solution. And it's for really any company to develop their kit of parts, their own kit of parts, and manage that. So when we started, one of our first problems we were trying to solve is how do we push flexibility of a kit of parts as far as we possibly could, because we realized that the demands of site, programmatic requirements, on and on and on, owner requirements, just demands incredible amounts of flexibility. The only way to scale a highly flexible solution is to then solve for that. How do you translate this difficult kit of parts that we just talked about? How do you make that accessible to architects and designers? And then be able to push that into production very quickly. So we started developing some internal technology that would help our sales teams and our production teams, our teams of architects, link up so that we're all sort of speaking a common language. That was then, we received an investment from Autodesk back in 2017 to then take that. That was the kind of inflection point when we decided we were going to develop this into market-facing software. So it is now, we launched it last fall. It's called Kit Connect, and it is a Revit to web solution that's really focused on this development and management and maintenance of prefabricated kit of parts. So yeah, there's two main components to it: a Revit plugin and a web application. So we're developing on top of the Revit API, on top of Forge. We work closely with Autodesk, and we're really trying to solve for how, if I'm somebody with deep knowledge of a kit of parts, how do I develop that system? And then if I'm a building designer, if I'm an architect taking that kit of parts, I probably don't have the deep knowledge of the kit. I don't know all the rules and systems. So then how do I make that easy back in my BIM environment to work with that kit of parts, right? And I think a good way to sum it up is we're trying to promote or enforce manufacturing best practices in a BIM context, in a Revit context. And that's something that today, these tools are just completely unconstrained, which is very powerful if you're doing any kind of building you can imagine. But when you're working with a kit of parts, when you're working with a prefab system, that lack of constraint is not always the best thing, right? It can create downstream problems like problems on the manufacturing floor where you have an inaccurate bill of materials, or you can't get a good bill of materials out of a BIM environment, right? So we're trying to solve some of these things and make those handoffs very seamless.
That's very helpful. I got one more question, Mike, to close this out. Thanks for
Sure.
your time. And that is, in much of the research I've done over the years in working with companies, we have seen that where the rubber hits the road is when that kit or that panel or that volumetric module hits the job site and gets assembled. And so the question, and I hope you have a good answer for this, and how you navigate this, maybe not, maybe that's still what you're working on, is how do you deal with the local installer and construction company and making the site work meet the factory work, the tolerances, the communication, and ensuring that that quality control and that quality assurance occurs not just from design to fabrication and manufacture, but from the factory now to the job site. Because ultimately, if that falls apart, then that's the building. That's where what the client actually wants.
Yes.
At the end of the day, so.
Yes, definitely. No, that's a great question. And, I think number one, we've got a great team. We have, on the building side of our business, we have our design studio that develops the kit of parts, works with our manufacturers to develop those components. And then we have our supply chain and construction team that really you can think of as sort of their boots on the ground. They make sure that that those components are getting delivered from the manufacturer to the builder, and they'll work with the builder to on-ramp them, onboard them, so they understand, like, here's when material is going to drop on the site. We have a just-in-time delivery approach, right? So we're communicating with them. This is when material is going to arrive. This is how to stage your site if you don't know. We have really helpful things like videos and other learning materials that we use to onboard a new builder. So we're really, we try to make that a good white glove service as they're receiving material from Project Frog. And the other part of that goes to how you design the components. Again, I think just like we approach manufacturers, we want the building system to be able to, it's very hard to install it incorrectly on the field, and that's a big part of how to design the components. Is it needs to be obvious and easy, and I think that speaks to how we approach physical building components and software. It has to be easy and obvious to use. If we haven't done that, we always like to say we strive to delight the customer, and I think that's something that like good software companies try to practice. Like, we want it to be a delightful experience, whether you're using our software, you're working with our building components, and if you're able to bring any delight into a brutal industry like construction, I think we've done something right there. So that's really our approach, and that simplicity, accessibility, and making it easy to use is a big part of that.
Yeah, and I've always appreciated Project Frog's delightful and kind of playful approach to designing construction, which is very unique. I want to thank Mike Eggers for joining us from Project Frog. Mike, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ryan. This is great chat, and thanks for having me on.